Hello there, be welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to share with you guys about a thing that I have been thinking a lot recently. And this thing is vocabulary. So let's get started. Um, the biggest question that was passing through my mind about the language learn process that I'm trying to do is about the vocabulary. You know, as you guys probably know from my other videos, I have the goal to become C2 in English. It's like a really ambitious goal, and I want to really master the language. You know, I want to really be able to communicate myself well in the language and to be proficient in all areas of the language, mainly because I'm planning to study abroad. So, what is the thing that I'm thinking of vocabulary? Let's dive into it. It is quite simple actually. Should I learn vocabulary through a natural um, demonstration, to a natural exposition, or should I learn vocabulary through some active type of exposition? That's the big question, right? In some video before, I talked about Anki, and Anki is a thing that I'm really thinking about it in vocabulary about the language learn process. Because you see, Anki is a good tool for memorization, you know? I'm currently using Anki to countries of flags. Wait, flags of countries, and I'm doing every day or almost every day is not a it's not a strict thing that I should do. I just doing for fun. I downloaded a Anki deck of the country's flags, and I just go there and try to do and trust in the method of the spaced repetition. When I got right about, I put there yes right, and when I got wrong, same thing. And I trust the method that will be working, and I will memorize all the flags of the countries, or at least in somehow I will be able to recognize the most parts of it. I'm just doing by fun, you know? And it's quite impressive sometimes how I can remember some flags, you know? I just look up into a flag and I recognize it because I'm doing flashcards on Anki. The same thing goes for English, right? I'm doing some geographical Anki deck, if it's the right thing to say. I have three of them: country capitals, country flags, and country maps. You know, and I'm doing just for fun to recognize some maps or flags of the countries. But I'm also using to language. You know, I st- I still doing my uh, flashcards of French. I have flashcards for French that I created some months ago when I was studying French. As I said here, I started kind of to study French in a really short period of time, but I decided to put my, you know, to really put my focus on English and just pass through this semester just study English. Is what I'm doing now. I'm just doing these flashcards occasionally to put the words forward and memorize the word. It is simple phrases actually, and is not a very big deck. You know, it's just some flashcards. And I also have been using to English to speaking more precisely. I But there are some phrase that I want to speak, and after that I go there and try to speak out loud. And after I compare my speech with the audio that I put in the back of the card, and if I got right, I put there easy and trust in the spaced repetition algorithm. But with speaking, with the speaking is probably good for me because it's just a way to practice your speaking and your. In my case, I'm aiming for improve my accent a bit to reduce a bit my accent because I want to sound more native. You know, there is a lot of discussion in this topic if you should really try to sound more native, but it's a particular thing, and I really want to improve in the language, to have a better accent, to have a better intonation, to have a better everything when I speak, when I write, when I listen, when I reading. So it is my goal to master English. And for do that, I'm doing this flashcard. But what I have been thinking recently is that should I create some flashcards to vocabulary? And I know that there is some ways to create vocabulary decks for flashcards that isn't great at all. I in my start in this recent English learn process, because when I was a kid, I started to learn English in school, even though it's barely anything that I was learning. I almost learned nothing in English in that time, but now I'm trying to put more intentionality into my language learn process. And recently, in the in 2 or 3 years before now, I started to learn English properly, I would say, or less than that. But whatever, I used flashcards one by one, right? In the front, I put a word in English with some image, and in the back, I put the translation to it. Was not in the Anki, because in that time I didn't use Anki because I thought that was very complicated and I should install the app. Was very strange for me, but now it's um, very natural the way that the Anki works. But in that time, Anki was such a strange to for me, and I just used other apps to it. I use dual cards with it, which is an app that I think that I talk it here in the channel. I'm not sure, but I started to use it and was not great. No, looking back, I realized how this somehow helped my English. I could recognize words, I could understand what they mean, I could translate more easily in the words that I'm used to it, but it still was very robotic. Was such a strange thing, because there is a card that I still remember it, which is a phrase that I read in some article, was a slightly different interpretation. And I just saved this flashcard in the front, slightly different interpretation, and in the back, I don't remember the exactly translation, but should be like uh, interpretação ligeiramente diferente in Portuguese. And I was using that flashcard, you know, and that flashcard really stick into my head. I really remember slightly different interpretation, but this is not a thing that I shall use it probably. I will not use this phrase like in an everyday speech. Hardly I could use this phrase, but it's not. What I mean is that it's not a normal phrase. It's not a common phrase, and even if it is, you could say slightly different interpretation. But when I was using that app, the words don't have meaning itself. I just was remember the phrase and the translation, and by the spaced repetition, I was like really uh, that was really sticking into my head, and I was thinking, no, this word and that word, this word and that word, and was words that I mean, I was expanding my vocabulary, but somehow my vocabulary became robotic, and I was not being able to talk the language, and to properly know the language. I was just knowing words, isolated words, and sometimes it was hard because there isn't a clear translation between some word in English and some word in Portuguese. And I was like, whoa, that could be useful for some specific things. If you want to do a relation between your native tongue and your target language, could be useful indeed. But um, I mean, I am becoming more and more suspicious about the method that uses translation to learn. In the beginning, I can understand why you should use translation sometimes, and why you should search for words and to improve. But when you reach the intermediate level in English, or when you reach a certain degree of proficiency, you should not use language, your native language, as a translation, because that is not a very optimal way to study your target language. You know what I mean, right? For example, if I take my shoe right there and translate to my Portuguese and look at it, and I'm not correlating the word shoe with the object itself, but I'm correlating the word shoe with the word sapato, which is the word in Portuguese, and with the object. So it has a bridge into it. So that could lead the speech to become more and more robotic and more, you know, like that, more slow. You could not communicate yourself very clearly if you still doing translations into your head, and that is a thing that all polyglots says in the daily basis, basically. Oh, see it daily basis is the other thing that I saw in my flashcards, and I still having this in mind, daily basis. But actually, I didn't saw this into any natural content that I searched for, and the grammatical engines and the grammatical tools that I have, let's say in Docs Google, say to me that this is weird. I never saw this term daily basis before. I never searched for it, but it's a thing that stick into my head just because I use it on flashcards in a bad way. There is good ways to use flashcard indeed, when you use the flashcard with whole natural fine natural whole phrases in context and understand the words by context. Yeah, you could do that. I'm not saying that that is not useful, and I'm being in a dilemma right now, because I think that this could be useful, and this could be a thing that I should use to reach C2 level more easily and more fast. But at the same time, I'm thinking, is that really optimal? Is that what will get me to the mastery in the language? Is that what will make me master in the language? I don't know. I currently thinking that what I should do instead is to learn vocabulary passively and in a natural way. Don't try to memorize vocabulary. I follow up the I follow the Steve Kaufman here in the YouTube, and oh, pardon, he's a good polyglot, and what he's talking about, um he always talk about vocabulary and how you should not try to memorize it, but instead acquire it. And yeah, makes sense for me, but I'm rethinking and thinking and thinking over and over again about this and how I should approach it. Probably I will just use a natural approach, as Steve Kaufman says, and I think that I will use a notebook where I put the vocabulary that I found interesting for my personal use. There is a difference between the passive vocabulary and the active vocabulary. Your passive vocabulary is basically what you can recognize when you see it, and your active vocabulary is something that you uh, use it constantly. And it is that I think that I should have um notebook for my active vocabulary and just try to exposure myself to grow up my passive vocabulary. You know, for I can say, I think, for example, I'm reading a Death by a Black Hole, as I said to you guys, and I'm not feel I feel a bit of some difficult here or there for understand some terms when I'm reading fast, but when I stop for some seconds, I can easily understand what he's talking about. First, because he's a good communicator, and second, because it's not a very complicated language to me, at least, because I'm using to the terms in Portuguese and they are very related. They are cognates, so I'm I'm just consuming that, and it's easy to me to consume that. But probably, if I will talk about electrons, subparticles, and all the astrophysics stuff, um I would be in trouble because I don't know if I can do this properly. Uh, it is that basically I'm thinking of my vocabulary and how I should approach it, and it's being a real dilemma. It's being a thing that I'm really thinking about it, and I will avoid for now use Anki for flashcards because my problem is what I should put into the back. In the front I could put the whole phrase with a word in a word highlighted, and yeah, I can understand it, but somehow I think that is still not very natural. It seems very robotic, at least for me. Because, I mean, probably if you do enough um, exposure and enough use of the language, I mean, if you understand a word through the vocabulary, your Anki Deki, and you use this word in your real life, and when you were writing, when you are speaking, and besides that, you will also watch a bunch of content. And sometimes you see that word is not become will not become robotic. Instead, it will become more natural, and you are right. Will know that word, but again, it's a personal choice. And for me now, I think that I will avoid flashcards for vocabulary, though I will use flashcards to improve my accent. And with that, I kind of will be doing some active exposure to the vocabulary itself, right? Because, for example, if I take some phrase of the Hamlet monologue, as I'm doing, or of the V speech, which is a thing that I shall record here, uh, I took that and put into my speaking vocabulary. When I'm training, for example, some prompt of it. Let me think one. For example, in the Hamlet monologue, there is a phrase, I there is the rub. If I take this phrase and I just practice the speak, I there is the rub, even if I'm not actively searching for the vocabulary and actively trying to remember what each word means. If I had studied this word before, if I had studied what I means, if I had studied what rub means, and that's the most uncommon words there is. I know what there is means, obviously, but if I am sure what rub means, for example, and when I saw it, and if I can speak it properly, even if I'm not doing this intentionally, I will still having some type of spaced repetition in my brain to understand the the word of rub, for example. So I'm still doing the Anki for speaking to improve my accent. I will still trying to exposure myself to improve my vocabulary in a natural way, And I'm thinking of use my notebook for note down words that I really find interesting. Actually, I started doing this already, but when I mean to doing it, it's to give continuity. For example, there is some words here you can see indeed as the first word, and indeed is a word that I really like. It is my favorite word in English. And for example, shall, you can see that it's very old-fashioned, and it's word that I like, old-fashioned words. But I note down a bunch of words with its explanation, and I should do it more. But I really should try to avoid um, words that I will not use, because aren't that useful to note down. I could know it by passive exposure, but I shouldn't try to note them down. But it is that I just want to share with you guys what are my current thoughts on vocabulary and what I'm doing for my C2 study plan, which is not going very well, I would say. But again, I said to you, and I repeat, but I'm not used to follow a routine, like a stricted routine, and I'm consuming a lot of content. I mean, probably I have 4 or 5 hours daily of English content, but I'm not doing the active study. Though thanks to what I'm still consuming the content, I still haven't improvement, I think, in the language, and probably my speaking is get a little better with time. Though sometimes I feel that my speaking is weird. You know what I mean, right? So that is it, and I think that you all are doing great. See you guys soon. And I just realized I forgot the microphone. Oh no, but see you guys.